Hi, everyone. So, thank you guys so much for being here. As you know, today we have a special guest, John. He's a retired LAPD detective, and he's so well rounded and has so much experience under his belt. And I love to call him my friend. We have some technical difficulties, so I have John on the phone. Say hi, John.
Hello.
Can you guys all hear him? Thank you guys for being here. Thank you, mods, for being here. The most amazing mods ever. Happy Saturday, everybody. So, I've been talking to John um, about this case. So, as you guys know, me and Lana started covering this case from the moment it hit. And I called John and I said, I have a lot of questions about this PCA. And John said to me, because I'm a writer, and he said to me, "You're looking at this from a writer's perspective, and this is not a writer's perspective." And I just want to give a little bit of background on what John does, or what he's retired now, but he's run CIs, which are confidential informants. So we can talk a little about that. He's a master at interrogation and interview. Um, Teaches law enforcement interrogation interview, which I'm like, John, can I please just attend one of those seminars? And he's worked some really high profile cases working in under LAPD, especially for the major crime division. Is that what it is? Major crimes, right? I'm getting that right,
Yeah.
right? And especially we can get into this at some point too, is like maybe a little bit about what the difference is between cartels and like just a drug town, right? We'll get into that, right? So can you guys hear John? Let us know.
Hello. Hello. Hello.
Yay. Hi, everybody. Oh my gosh, I have Nightbot in here. Nightbot's really bizarre. I'm probably going to disable Nightbot. I have no idea what it does. BB Mommy, I'm sure you did nothing wrong. We need to disable Nightbot. He's really naughty. Um, so tell me about the PCA again, John. So you said I was looking at it. It's very boilerplate language you were saying, and I was getting hung up on the minutia of the language, right?
Right. Again, there's, uh, we're taught classes on how to write search warrants and things like that, and there's very specific language that we use because of legal reasons and case law, and keeping it being very articulate in certain ways. But there is a format. And it's not like typical format for like writing a story, writing a book. There is a format to the warrants and requirements that we have to have in the warrant.
And so, and you were also telling me, because I was like, I'm gonna actually block Nightbot right now because Nightbot's being really naughty and just like telling everyone in chat that they're being naughty when they're not. Oh no, it says I can't time them out. I don't know what's going on. Everyone just ignore Nightbot. We'll get rid of him later. He's like telling everybody he can't. John can't. John can't see what's going on this side. But yes, okay. So so I was one of the things I had asked you about that seemed bizarre that we were looking at from the standpoint of not being in LAP, not being in the police, not being in law enforcement. And again, you're not working this case. Everything we're saying here is from not seeing the crime scene photos, right? And not knowing a lot. We all know the same amount about this case, right, John?
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons that I'm kind of glad to talk on your show is I want to put out an investigator's perspective. And right now, and being from LA and retired, I don't have any insight to this case, but the only information that's out there publicly is from the warrant returns and things like that. And the search warrant is one of many investigative techniques. So we're seeing a very small part of the investigation. a very small part of it, probably 10 to 20% of the investigation is public. So, everything that everybody's talking about in the media, on these podcasts and stuff, is mostly guesses, and they're surmising, because just the information is not out there. We have partial information from one of their investigative tools, and that's all that we have.
And you've written a lot of search warrants in your time.
Yes, I have. Yeah, I retired after 33 years on LAPD, and I wrote hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of search warrants.
And so what we're seeing when we get like the 769 pages I sent you is basically, like you said, they're returns. They're like return receipts. Can you explain to us what that means?
So when you write an affidavit and go to a judge and say, I want to serve the search warrant, the judge reads it and authorizes the search warrant to be served. And then you go and you serve your search warrant, whether it's at a location or on a business or a company or, an internet provider. You serve your search warrant and get your information back. You have a certain amount of time to go back to the judge and say, I'm doing a search warrant return. Here, I did serve the warrant that you signed for me, and this is what I recovered as a result of this search warrant. And what's attached to that, what you guys are seeing here, is when I go into a residence and I search it, before I leave the house, I'm going to leave a usually handwritten, receipt of the items that I took. And it's going to be a very brief explanation of those items. It's not going to be detailed. And that's what's attached. Hang on.
Oh, shoot. Are we? I think your mic might be working in real time. We might have just gotten his audio working on there. I'm going to mute you. Okay, you're muted. Okay, good. Okay. Yeah. So it's what's attached. Yes.
Okay. So this handwritten receipt that is not detailed at all, that's left behind at the location where we served the warrant, is what's attached to the return. Then the investigator is going to go back to his office and he's going to do a very detailed property report, which is going to be used to book the items into evidence. So on the property receipt, you're going to see very nondescriptive things like a knife and this and that, or black clothing on the.
Sorry, it's the our LA helicopters. You know all about that, John, right? Sorry, happens all the time.
Yeah. But on the detailed property receipt, we're not seeing those. So you're not going to get the in-depth description of the items with serial numbers and all that kind of stuff, because that's not part of what's returned with the search warrant to the judge. That's just a handwritten receipt left at the scene, and a very brief description.
So what we're basically getting, because they know that it's going to be made public, and they're trying to keep, law enforcement is trying their best to keep things kind of close to their best. What we're basically getting at this point is just bare nuts and bolts. We're not seeing, you called it, I actually have to look at my notes. You called it something that we're not getting. Hold on. We're not getting the evidence reports, right?
Well, yeah, you're not getting the detailed evidence reports. You're not getting those. Those are going to be kept in the detective's case book, or we call it a murder book. It's going to be in his case file, and it's not going to be released to the public. It will be turned over to the defense and stuff in discovery, but most of the people aren't going to see any part of the investigation until it goes to trial.
Okay, and we kind of touched on. Can we talk a little bit about? So, as a writer, when I first, and this is something I brought to you, as a writer, when I first looked at the PCA, I was like, this is garbage. And one of the things that stood out to me was that it said vehicle number 1. And I was like, why are they saying vehicle number 1? Like, are they hiding the fact that there's a vehicle number 2? And again, all of this is, we don't know if this is actually what's going on in Moscow, but John has a really good, he's done search warrants before. He's written PCAs. He knows how these things work, and the politics also behind, and we will get into that, right? About the politics about press conferences and how that works. So can you explain why it would ever say vehicle number one in a PCA?
So again, there's ways that we're going to format we're writing search warrants that we're not creative writers. We've never been trained. Our grammar's not going to be the best because that's not where our training is. But these reports are going to be building on each other. You're going to write your initial crime report. You're going to write all your warrants, and you're going to write follow-up reports, and they're going to continually build on each other. So at the time that he's writing this and he's describing the vehicle for the first time, he's going to identify it as vehicle number one. And then from now on, throughout the investigation, when they're talking about that car, it's going to be vehicle number one. He has no idea if there ever will be a vehicle number two, but just to avoid there being confusion, if you just kind of said the white Elantra or the suspect's vehicle, later on, now it turns out that a second vehicle was used, or something like that, a second person or second vehicle is involved. Now now a suspect's vehicle again, it can cause confusion. So you're just numbering things as they go, just so as you build on it, because you don't know where the case is going to take you. So you just keep building on it and building on it.
Right. And you said that usually in a PCA, they'll put a license plate, right? So it won't say like vehicle number one, vehicle number two. It'll be like this vehicle, it'll have a license plate.
Well, no, you still will call it suspect vehicle number one or vehicle number one, even though you do have a license plate, because license in this case it did. The license plates can change on vehicles, and I think Brian did re-register his car in a different state, so he had to turn in the existing plate and got a new license plate in the middle of the investigation. So if they would have listed the car just solely on a license plate, it would have been confusing later down the line when you're describing the same vehicle, but it's got a different license plate.
So it just keeps everything kind of running smoothly and without confusion. And there might be a vehicle number two at some point, but we just don't know. And because it says vehicle number one doesn't necessarily mean there's a vehicle number two.
Yeah. So, like when I was reading it, it meant nothing to me. When other people are reading it, they're going, "Oh my gosh, they're calling it suspect vehicle one." Well, there's got to be a two,
So true. So true. Well, you heard me, like how excited I was getting about certain things, and you're just like, no, like we're not writers. Like, no, it's not like that. This is very boilerplate. There is a tactic to writing a PCA. You know that these things are going to be shared because of FOIA, because of the Freedom of Information Act. So there are some things that you put in a PCA and some things you don't. Is that true?
Yes, exactly. In the probable cause, you just need to establish probable cause to make an arrest. You don't need to go overboard. You don't need to give up everything that you have, because if you give up too much, and sometimes it can ruin investigative leads, especially in a case like this that's being followed by, so many people. If not saying they do, but if they had a witness and they mentioned it in the PCA that this witness was on the street, I mean, the media would be flooding that street trying to figure out who that witness is. So if you don't need that information to establish probable cause, why would you put it in there? But I just want to, just emphasize again, the information that everybody who's doing podcasts, all the media, they have so little of the investigation. Remember, you're seeing some of the search warrant returns. You're not seeing what was recovered in those, a detailed description. You're seeing that you're requesting data from banks and stuff like that, but we don't know what it is. We don't know why they requested it. There's a lot of databases that the police have and the FBI have at their access that don't require search warrants, so they could have a lot of information from that. We don't know if they can access a database for like license plate readers. I don't know if there's any in that area, but so they could have a lot of information on the vehicle based on a license plate reader or it passing, a traffic cams and things like that. There's a lot of other techniques they have that we don't know anything about.
And they don't necessarily have to put it in the PCA, because the PCA's main purpose is to
just establish probable cause to make the arrest. So you just have to establish probable cause. So if you have certain information that, like, it's to your disadvantage to put it out because it could, and for one reason or another, it could hamper your investigation. You don't need to put it in there. It's not a requirement. It's just, you're just got to put enough in there to satisfy the judge that you have probable cause to arrest this person.
right. And you were saying when I was asking you questions, you were like, see how it says that they did a video canvas. You're like, I'm 100% certain they did a neighborhood canvas. They just didn't put it in the PCA. And there might be reasons why they didn't. Tell us why.
If it's a typical investigation, they would have went door to door and talked to everybody in that neighborhood about if they heard anything, if they saw anything, if they, over the last couple of days, if they saw anything suspicious or any suspicious vehicles and stuff like that. And we don't know what the results of any of those interviews were. Maybe nothing, but there may be something. And again, it wouldn't be wise to put something like that in the PCA, because then you're just going to clue people that someone on that neighborhood saw something, and then they're just going to bombard the neighborhood looking to identify who that was.
We would too, John, right?
Exactly.
We would. Yeah. And so it makes sense. After I talked to you, I started kind of going, okay, rider hat off. I'm not a law enforcement officer. I don't understand how these things work. And then when the search warrants were coming in and you were kind of explaining how that is, and that search warrants are very specific, right? So like when you write a search warrant, you have to be insanely specific about what you need, right?
Right.
Okay. And so
what you're looking for, why you think it will be where you're looking for it, and you have to form an opinion is going to be there.
And so these search warrants that we're getting back, the receipts that we're seeing, is because whatever the officers wrote in these search warrants met the criteria to get it back. They got a return on it. Is that what I'm?
No, anytime you apply an affidavit to obtain a search warrant to get a judge's signature and he grants it, yeah, I'm going to sign that warrant. You can now serve that warrant. And normally you have 10 days to serve a warrant once it's issued.
Okay.
If it's like for a residence, if it's for electronic data and stuff like that, there's longer times. But anytime you serve a search warrant, you have to return a copy of the search warrant and a typed out thing which is a search warrant return to the judge to let them know, yeah, I did serve that warrant that you signed, and this is what I recovered as a result of that seizure and search.
Okay. Can we brush up a little bit on something that me and you talked about, which is, because my opinion, and I don't, and I'll let you share your opinion, but my opinion is that I feel that they were clued into Brian Koberger pretty early on. And I'm not sure how. I don't know if it was through somebody seeing him or how, but can you tell us? And again, this is speculation. We're just speculating. We don't have these insights. But what is your feeling on this, John? What do you think?
As I said before, I tend to agree with you. It looks like their evidence started to point to Brian very early, but I'm guessing, right? Because again, I don't know what evidence they have that point that direction and when it is that they obtained it. So it's a guess, but based on some of the things they are asking for, again, they're asking for a lot of financial stuff. Now a lot of it we don't know who those accounts are to and stuff like that. In a case like this, I would probably be writing warrants to the victims' accounts and stuff, and as a way of tracing where they were on that night and the nights leading up, where they're using their credit cards, where they take out cash. So they use their credit card at this bar. Let's go look at the film at there and see if there's anybody in there that's maybe following them or walked out when they walked out. So they're trying to early on establish, a pattern of their victims and where they were, and was there anybody suspicious seen at those locations and stuff. So that might be what some of the financial stuff is for at the beginning. But what they're getting in return of that, we don't know.
And so there was some speculation as to, and I also was like, until I talked to you, why not initially? So they find this white Elantra, and it, ties to Koberger. They see it at the WSU student housing parking lot, one of 22,000 or more, but they see his. What do you think the bolo said, first of all? If you had to guess, we don't know what the bolo said. The be on the lookout to law enforcement.
Right.
But what is typically when you have somebody who's a suspect, a murder of like 4 people suspect, how would you handle that if you were writing the bolo?
Typically in a case like this, again, we're just reaching out to try and get as many leads as we can. So we're asking local law enforcement to help us try and locate vehicles that are in the area. Again, I have another way of doing this. I can access DMV and make a search query and stuff like that. But what I don't want is somebody questioning a potential suspect about my murder case, because when you put out a bolo, it goes to all uniformed law enforcement in the area. Some of them may be very experienced and have a good handle on their job. Some of them may be very new and inexperienced at their job. And none of them are going to know a lot about the case or know what I know about the case. And so if I was to put out a bolo in a case like this, I'm assuming it told them not to question about the case, just to identify who's driving the vehicle and report that back to me. So now I know there's a white Elantra in the neighborhood being driven by this person, and they're using this cell phone. And now I can start looking at that person without him knowing that he's a potential suspect. Because that's the last thing I want to do is if I have a potential suspect, I don't want them to know that they're a potential suspect to the very last minute.
So you wouldn't interview him prior?
No, again, I'm going with standard procedure on these types of cases. I'm not going to go out and interview people with white Elantras unless I have nothing else to go on. And it's going for a while. I have no other leads. I'm stuck. I have nowhere to go. Then I'll maybe start talking to people with the white Elantras. So the feeling is, or the theory is, if I go talk to somebody, let's say Brian was stopped and identified as being a person driving a white Elantra using this cell phone, and he's in this area. And he is a suspect. And I go talk to him. He can always say, I don't want to talk to you. I want an attorney. And as soon as he said that, I'm prohibited from asking him anything else. And that can interfere with me questioning him later on down the line. Now I do have evidence. I'm going to arrest him, and I want to talk to him about the case or lock him into a statement. There's issues because he's already told me he didn't want to talk to me without an attorney, right?
Right.
So he has no obligation to talk to me. And if he does talk to me, he can be lying, and I would never know it because I haven't built my case yet. But again, my biggest fear would be, no, officer, no detective, I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to my attorney. I have to let him go now.
Yeah.
what's typically going to happen if he really is a suspect, he's going to fill the car full of gasoline and light it on fire, or he's going to flee, or he's going to destroy other evidence, or he's going to discard. If it's just a serial killer type person, many of them collect trophies or keep memorabilia from the act so they can keep continually reliving it. So if I clue into him that he is a suspect, or I am looking at him, and he walks away and I can't stop him, there's no benefit in me questioning him early. It can cause a lot of bad things. What would be the benefit if I went to Brian before I could arrest him and say, hey, Brian, is this your car? Yes, my car. Were you in this neighborhood that night? No, I wasn't. Okay, have a nice day. What else? I mean, but the biggest fear is he just say, I'm not talking to any lawyer.
Right. Because once he does that, it's just done. And like you
Yeah.
said, he could go and destroy his evidence. He can, like, if that Elantra, we don't know yet, right? But if that Elantra has victim's blood or blood in it or whatever, or something, fibers, anything, and he were to set it on fire because he was tipped off.
Or, another one is just fleeing. And now I'm spending months of resources trying to locate him. And if he does go into a foreign country like Mexico, it's quite often very difficult for us to get very manpower intensive to get somebody back from a foreign country or to locate or find somebody.
Yeah. I think that's because I was like wondering that until I spoke with you, and it was like, well, duh, like, yeah, of course that makes sense. So you would, if you were the lead detective on this, you would put in your bolo basically, observe this vehicle, let us know who's driving, but do not question he's a murder suspect potentially, right?
Right. I would say it would be that not to discuss the case, but identify. The request would simply be to identify who's driving the vehicle and any information you can obtain on them. Do not discuss potential criminal case.
Right, because it just, I mean, it could be a rookie officer. It's just like a traffic officer.
And again, so this, even if it's a rookie officer and he does start asking the questions, he could tell that officer, I don't want to talk to you without an attorney. And that could, again, ruin me questioning him later because he's already made that request for an attorney. There are ways to overcome that, but it's a lot more difficult. It makes my job a lot harder. So I would prefer, like in the case of Brian, I would rather have built my case and already know a lot of facts about what I think happened or what I can prove he did. And then I can build a strategy to interview him and interrogate him. And it could be that I want to start by telling him, hey, I got all this stuff that, you have no hope in trying to get a confession, which very rarely happens, by the way. Or usually what we're trying to do is get them into lock them into statements that are contrary to what I know I can prove, because that shows, it's very prejudicial towards him for the jury when we can show, hey, you lied to the detectives about where you were. Have you ever been in the house? Have you ever been in the house before? Those type of things. We want to catch them up in the stories, but I can't do that if I don't know what I can prove and what I can't. Because you don't want to go into an interview and lie to a guy and tell him you know something, because it might not be true, and not you just lost all credibility for the rest of the interview or interrogation.
And I mean, we would think that Moscow PD knew, the detectives knew at this point that he was a very experienced student of criminology, of murder, basically, right? I mean, he knows.
Well, at what point they knew that or had a clue that, we don't know, but they're continually to build their case. And I'm personally not going to talk to him about his Elantra and his whereabouts until after I know and can prove certain things, and I'm going to arrest him. And again, I don't think they're out blanketly going and talking to everybody with white Elantras and questioning about the murder. That would not be typical tactics.
Police work, yeah. Okay, so tell me about these press conferences. You were saying when you do cases, like, the thing you don't like the most is
Yeah, as a lead investigator on a difficult case, especially a high-profile case like this, I can tell you that the lead investigator, anybody involved in this investigation, is under a lot of pressure and a lot of scrutiny. Press conferences are political statements. They're, the command staff is going to say what they think they need to say or what the public needs to hear. And I can't tell you how many times I've had an investigation and I've argued with my bosses about what we're going to say or not say in a press conference, or what we're going to release and not release. And they're the bosses. They always win. And so many times a press conference will come out with information that I didn't want to be put out, or I didn't want to be put out that way, or I didn't want to ask that. And another thing is, if I don't need it, I really hate to request a tip line or ask for information, because that overwhelms you. Thousands of people are going to call in. Some of them credible. Some of them think they have information, but it pans out not to be what they thought it was. But every Looney Tune crazy person who wants attention is going to call that tip line. And for us, as part of our due diligence, we have to follow up on every one of those leads, or the defense is going to say, did you look at every possibility, or didn't you look at why didn't you? This caller said that he saw this person at this time. Why didn't you follow up on that? So when you have a tip line, it's one of the ways that really overwhelms your resources. But the press conference is a political statement from the command staff, and they're saying politically what they think the public needs to hear or wants to hear, and that's it.
And you will, as a lead investigator, you will get overruled by brass, and they
every time.
every time. And so it could be that, like, let's say Officer Payne, who's the lead investigator in this, might not have wanted Chief Fry to do those press conferences, but they have to. And part of doing a press conference is kind of quelling fears in the community, right?
Yeah, it's a press conference is part of community relations, and the community has a great deal of fear. 4 people in our little community were just killed. What's the likelihood of it happening again? How long before you catch the guy? Are you on his trail? And you may be, getting evidence and building a case, but you don't want to put all that out. But politically, or for community relations, you have to put out something to let the public know, hey, we are doing something. We are working on this. Sometimes these investigations take a lot of time. When you're doing like DNA and other testing, those things take a long time to come back. And I'm surprised in this case they got some of the DNA back so fast. And it's, in my opinion, it's just strictly because they involved the FBI and used the FBI labs and stuff like that. Most other police departments would have had a much longer wait for DNA returns.
They did get that back fast, huh?
Yes.
And we talked about, so it's touch DNA. And so he wasn't in the system as far as, because they had to go and get familial DNA, right? So does that tell us he wasn't in the system?
I don't think they were, they're not looking for familiar DNA. I think they were looking for his DNA.
Well, they found it on the snap of the sheath.
Right. So, that's the kind of stuff that takes it from a circumstantial case to, no, you have hard evidence. You have DNA, touch DNA, that is 99.999%, which is as high as it can get. So it excludes Brian from everybody else in the world. It excludes him from that. This touch DNA on the snap is his. And when you say touch DNA, almost everything we're going to get nowadays is touch DNA, unless you're getting it from blood or bodily fluids and that kind of stuff. So the fact that they got this inside the residence is now it's no longer a circumstantial case. You have hard evidence that this guy was, this was, again, we don't know everything they know, but this is probably the sheath of the murder weapon with his DNA on it inside the residence next to two of the victims. So that's to me, as an investigator, that would be very damning evidence and beyond circumstantial.
Okay.
Circumstantial is that, hey, you're in the area and that kind of stuff. And, a lot of things point to you, but don't, place you in there. This places him in there, or places him in contact with that sheet.
So Hunter Soup is saying, but it's still quote, only touch DNA, right? I'm a bit confused about how much that proves.
Only touch DNA. It's his DNA. It came from his body. And DNA has a life shelf and that kind of stuff. And to me, how do you explain that we can chemically prove that you touched the sheath that the murder weapon was in, the case, and that case was inside the house, laying on a bed next to two victims? How do you explain that away? And you can surmise a lot of things, right?
Right.
And there's a lot of conspiracy theorists that can allege that DNA we planted. In today's day and age, that possibility is almost nil. In a case like this, you're in a room. Well, first of all, why Brian? How did you get his DNA to be able to plant his DNA? And who thought that far ahead to leave that sheath there? But now you're bringing all these detectives and officers and people in the house and things like that don't know each other. So how could they possibly form a conspiracy to, target somebody when none of these investigators or FBI agents, detectives, they don't know each other beforehand? So they could not have prearranged to a conspiracy. It would be, in today's day and age, with everything, it's going to be very, very difficult.
And if you're obviously there's police corruption in lots of places, but if you're going to do something like this, one of the first things you don't do is bring in the FBI, right? Because they're not.
Yeah, not that I would ever be in a conspiracy, but if you're going to be conspiracy, the last thing you do is call in the FBI, who now they've, deployed 40 agents or 40 people from the FBI were in the area and working on this case. Well, those 40 people are coming from different offices. They don't know, some of them don't know each other, and they definitely don't know the detectives and investigators involved in the case. Or the likelihood would be extremely rare.
Yeah. Oh, are we beeping again? Oh, okay. And obviously there are ways that the defense could counteract that. Someone in chat said they could say that the sheath was stolen. Yes, 100%. So the prosecution's going to have to prove other things, like he was in the area, that his cell phone was. And one of the things you said that was interesting is, because we all think Brian's really smart, and he is book smart, but tell us, John has worked so many cases, you guys, in so many high profile cases. In LA, we have how many murders a day? I don't know, but lots of high profile cases. John told me one time, every criminal I've caught is stupid, because the minute they get caught is when they're dumb, right? They did something foolish. And you have arrested. There
have been many, many serial killers, Ted Bundy, who were actually geniuses. Still got caught because they, book smart, common sense, and again, their own knowledge, no matter how much he studied in a college on criminal law and stuff, he doesn't know what detectives know and stuff like that. And there is also the fear factor, if you've ever been in a life-threatening or a real serious situation, there's certain things that happen to your body when you get the tunnel vision and things like that. It would be very difficult for most people to be calm and cool and collected when they're committing 4 murders and then fleeing for it, or they're preparing to do it. You know, they can think about this and prepare for it, but it's, you know, just like a professional athlete. They train, but the first time they get into a game, they're nervous. You know, and this is the same type of thing. No matter how much he prepared, when you get the adrenaline pumping and now it's life or death and the fear factor and all that stuff, so, you know, people do very strange things. You know, I hear, you know, like people were talking about the movement of his car and stuff like that. And I've been on hundreds of surveillances watching people who were committing crimes or have committed crimes, and they do very silly things. They're driving because they're not thinking clearly. And I can guarantee you that whoever was driving that white Elantra did not think they were going to be on video that much. I mean, I go to a crime scene, I do video canvases, and we miss cameras because they're surreptitious, you know, they're small and they're back in the dark and you miss stuff. I guarantee you, whoever scoured that neighborhood had no idea how many cameras or where they were in that neighborhood. You might have picked out a couple of them, but you're not going to know them all. So again, he's not thinking of that camera when he's doing that 3-point turn and that kind of stuff. His mind's right about an hour.
That's what I told you. I said, how does he just do this 3-point turn in front of this house when he knows there's cameras? And John said, what cameras are in your neighborhood? And I'm like, I don't know, but I'm not committing a murder. And he's like, okay, well, tonight when you go out at night, I want you to see and tell me how many cameras there are in your neighborhood. And I'm like, oh my gosh, good point. But yeah, so street smart, book smart, and also sometimes, I mean, this is just my opinion. Sometimes being the smartest person in the room all the time makes it so you don't learn anything because there's no room for you to learn. You're always the smartest person. So, I mean, so somebody I'm starring you guys' questions so we can come back to them. And I will ask some of these questions, but it is interesting that, and they will have to prove this, right? With the prosecution's going to have to prove that it's not just that he could say, well, the sheath got stolen, it's my DNA, but someone took it from me, it was missing, I didn't even realize it was missing, whatever. They're going to couple that with pings, and we don't necessarily pings and they probably have video. This is conjecture, we don't know, but they probably have video of him that they haven't told us they have, right? Because they didn't need it to tell us.
Maybe not. I have no idea. I mean, we don't know what they have. But I mean, when you just, you know, thinking about a prosecution, you know, you do have the traffic stops that put him in that car with that phone at certain times, and then you have that phone. You know, this is the circumstantial stuff, but you have his phone heading in the direction of the victims, and then it turns off or put in airplane mode, and then mysteriously after the murders are committed, it comes back on. So those are the circumstantial stuff, and you put it together with the DNA and the hard evidence you have, and just the little bit that we know, it sounds like they have a pretty strong case, in my opinion.
In your opinion.
I have no idea what they have or don't have. Obviously, they think they have a strong case, or they wouldn't be taking it to court.
Yeah. And you said something interesting about the prelim, because I'm going to the prelim in June, and I'm like, and you said something interesting. You said, don't be surprised if they don't give you all the info at prelim. Why?
Well, again, the prelim is designed not to be a trial. Again, you're just going to put on enough evidence so that a judge thinks that there's a preponderance of evidence or a reasonable cause to believe that this person committed the crimes and that you can prove it. And so now let's go to trial. And it's designed to put on minimal witnesses and stuff like that, just enough to prove it. And in a preliminary hearing, as a detective, I can testify for other people, so we don't have to keep putting on so many witnesses. So I can testify, hey, this person gave me a statement, and this is what they said they saw. And this person told me they took, and it gave me this. I can testify for other people if I had directly contacted with them, right? And you can bring on other experts like the coroner or stuff like that. But for the most part, you're not going to be seeing the star witnesses that you want to see. You're going to just see mostly the investigators and a few experts to prove the key pieces of their case, just enough to show. And like I said, this trial, if it goes to trial, when it goes to trial, it's going to be very lengthy, and the prelim will probably last 4 or 5 days max, and it's all by design. You don't want a witness being on the stand for 3 days, being cross-examined, and and that kind of stuff. Just because why do all that in a prelim? It's just to determine that you have enough to go to trial.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see all the witnesses and stuff aren't going to testify. It'll probably be mostly the investigators.
And they've blocked out a week. Yes, BB Mommy, they've blocked out a week for it. And I was like, yay, we get to, maybe get into the nuts and the bolts and what is it? Nuts and soup.
Yeah, you're definitely going to get some of the key points of evidence. They definitely will be talking about the DNA. They definitely will be talking about the cause of death and the injuries and that kind of stuff. They will be talking about some of the phone warrants and pings and what, and you probably will hear what originally got them to Brian.
And so JB had another question. He said that Brian Koberger doesn't have any priors. Can you tell us a little bit about people maybe that don't have priors that are sadistic, potentially?
Well, he's never been caught or charged before. That doesn't mean he doesn't have prior. He hasn't done things prior. In my experience, criminals evolve, and like a person doesn't start going in and holding up a liquor store. When they were younger, they pickpocketed some candy and that kind of stuff. They built up to it. Dealing with a lot of the cases that I've dealt with and the type of people that I think Brian might be, I will guarantee you it'll probably come out. I can't guarantee you that it will probably come out that he has done some kind of stalking or had some different unusual behavior in the past, and it's escalated. Obviously, a big part of the investigation is going to be trying to determine if they can find prior victims. They might be out there, and Brian never came on the radar in those other investigations, and that's why he has no priors, because he wasn't caught. So a big part of their investigation now is to try and look for other victims that could have him prior, or other issues that he had with females, or stalking, or relationship problems and things like that. And I believe that a lot of that's going to come out. So, like I said, no priors. Yeah, he's never been arrested before, but I guarantee you that he's done some experimenting or some kind of stalking or following in the past.
It kind of like messed it up for me, like thinking that there was potential that he was innocent, was the IDs in the glove in the box.
But see, you and I talked about it. Boy, that sounds really strange.
Yes.
But we have no idea what those were. Were those old expired IDs of his? Or were those, could they be IDs from prior victims? Oh, yeah, it sounds good, but we have no way of knowing that.
True.
And if it was as juicy as it sounds, it's going to come out in maybe the prelim, for sure in the trial. What was interesting to me was the book with the underlying, and I'm really curious about that one.
Oh my gosh, page 118. Yes.
From what book?
From what book? What's the book? Do you think it's a book about cats, Sean?
I would doubt that one. Yeah, but typically, when you saw the number of items that they were seizing in the search warrants at the houses, many of those items are not true items of evidence. Okay, so if I go into a bedroom, let's say.
Yes, tell us this. I love this one. Yes. Okay, this is.
If I go into a bedroom and I'm searching and I find something in that bedroom that's of evidentiary value, right? I'm going to collect that item. I'm going to photograph it in place. This is where I found it. This is how I found it. And we're going to recover it. But I'm going to be looking for other things in that room so I can prove and show who had access to that room. So many of those, when you saw documents being listed in it, if I'm in that room and I see an AT&T bill to Brian, right? I don't need that AT&T bill because I'm already doing search warrants for his AT&T account, right? So I'm going to have everything. But I'm taking that bill because now I'm saying in this bedroom or in this drawer where this was found, in that same drawer was mail to this person, or there was shoes that fit this person exactly. These other personal items are in there, and that shows that he has dominion control or access, at least access, but most, we're looking to prove dominion control over those items. And so he can't say, well, that's my dad uses that room, not me. Well, how come your mail, your school book with your writing in it and dated, a couple days prior, that kind of thing. I don't know exactly what those documents were, but it might not be strange to see that many documents recovered because they're looking to prove dominion control over the area where other evidence was found. And again, that it could be clothing and stuff like that you can show that he wore in the past, even not involved in crime. But if he's like posting on Instagram or something and you see a very specific or unique shirt or hat that he's wearing, and now that shirt is in a closet with a bunch of other clothes I just happen to find some evidence in that closet. Pulling that shirt out, it might be a way of showing, hey, this is his closet. He has access to it. That's where his clothes are. It's not his mom's clothes in there. It's his.
Yeah. So again, dominion and control over an area, and especially if there's maybe something saying that it was this semester when he was at WSU. So it's a current document that was found in his desk is even better dominion and control, right?
Yeah, there would be like drawers in a bedroom, closets in a bedroom, and you're taking items of evidence out and you're collecting other items to kind of show the dominion control, or if it's a desk, in a common area, but you see on that desk has all of Brian's school books and it's got a personal letter that he wrote or something like that. You're going to collect some of those items to help prove that he has control of that, or at least access to that area.
And somebody asked, like, would you put a sheath on a belt? But we don't know what he was wearing. If he's the suspect, we don't know if he went in there with coveralls with no belt loop and he was just carrying the sheath in there. We don't know what that means.
Was it in a duffel bag?
Was it in a duffel bag? Yes.
You can surmise and guess a lot of stuff. But again, people do very strange or different things. And just because we would normally, if I'm carrying a knife, I would put it in a sheath, or I would, put the sheath on my belt. That might not be what he did. Sometimes reality is stranger than fiction. I've seen that many times.
And you've worked a lot of really big cases. You were peripheral in the first familial DNA case in US that went to court, right? And that was the Grim Sleeper
The
case
Grim Sleeper case out of LA.
out of LA.
So, if people don't understand what familiar DNA is, in the Grim Sleeper case, and again, I wasn't the lead detective on it. Me and my squad had two suspects that our job was to eliminate them as potential suspect before the DNA came back. So that's where I spent most of my time on that case. But this case was a suspect started doing homicides in in the early 80s, like 83, 84. And there was about 10 to 12 murders that we could tie to this guy through the same gun was used. And they were all prostitutes in a specific area of Los Angeles.
Was that Figueroa?
What's that? Figueroa.
Figueroa.
Yeah. It was along what we call the Figueroa corridor, along where the 110 freeway is. And so they were, most of the victims were narcotic users or, what we would call prostitutes. And there was, I think, around 10 or so murders that had the same MO. They could tie a lot of them together through the same gun and things like that. It was a unique caliber gun. And then around 1988 or so, the murders just stopped. And so the cases went unsolved. Everyone assumed that the killer moved to a different state or died or was arrested. But around 2000, several murders started occurring again. So it was a long break that the murderer took. But they were using the same weapon and stuff, and there were things that tied them to the earlier cases. That's why they called them the Grim Sleeper. But they did obtain some DNA in the more current cases. Back in the 80s, I hate to say it, but when I came on, I started the job, DNA wasn't a thing. And we didn't collect it as much as, we didn't know anything about, as much about DNA as we do now.
OJ kind of changed that, huh?
Well, no, yeah, a little bit, but there's been great advancements in DNA, and it's, people don't realize how strong of evidence DNA really is. When the biggest defense in a DNA case is to put on multiple experts and confuse the jury pool, because it's very technical science, but it's very accurate. And again, like DNA that's 99.999, that excludes that person beyond above anybody else in the world. It's that accurate. Well, in the Grim Sleeper case, that was the first time where we actually had DNA, and they put it into CODIS, our database that stores DNA. And when people go to prison, they actually collect their DNA and stuff like that. And there were no hits, but it was the first time where familiar DNA was, where they detected DNA in the system that was familiarly related to the DNA of our suspect. It's not the suspect's DNA, but it's somebody in his family closely related to them. And that's, and it turned out that it was the suspect's son was in prison.
Isn't that crazy?
And we started looking at, okay, who's this guy in prison related to? That's how we eventually got to the main suspect was Lonnie Franklin. And he was, I think it was 2010 or so, he was charged with 10 of homicides, but he's suspected of about 17. But some of them we couldn't prove, and several believed victims, we never did find the bodies. But that's what happened in this case, is they had the DNA of the suspect, or the DNA on the snap, and they suspected that it was Brian's DNA, because, or it could possibly be his. And how many other people they were collecting DNA, we don't know. So typically what you're going to do is you're going to put a surveillance on somebody like this, and you because at that time, you probably don't have enough to get a court order to take a DNA sample. Okay. So what you do is you put a surveillance on the person and you watch for them to discard an item. They have a water bottle they throw in the trash. Well, the courts have ruled whenever you throw something in the trash and walk away from it, it's abandoned property. Yeah. It's not subject to search and seizure and all that. Or you see the person smoking and you wait for them to put out a cigarette butt or something, and then you go collect that, and then you bring that back and you test it. If they match, then you use that to go and get a search warrant for the more accurate, swabs and stuff like that, DNA. So in this case, they actually took some items out of the Kohlberger's trash, and the DNA on the item, the DNA they recovered out of the trash, was familiar DNA to the DNA that was on the snap. And it turns out that I think it was, I don't know if they said it for sure, but I think it was the father's, or suspected to be the father's DNA. So that's how they would get in order to get the swabs for Brian's DNA.
Yeah, and they got it. Can you tell us a little bit about when we were talking about some things being a fishing expedition with the warrants and some things being, how to search? Will you write search warrants? Like, how do they work when you're trying to do a fishing expedition versus something
Well, one of the warrants I saw they wrote they were looking for a specific time frame of all the cell phones that were pinging off a tower in that area. That's a fishing expedition. You don't know if one of those numbers is connected to your suspect. You don't know yet, but it may eventually lead. So you're trying to collect, a big, you're looking for, like, the search warrants to the knife company. And I want everybody in this time frame that purchased that knife. That's a fishing expedition. Versus, I want all the electronics on this very specific transaction, which we think is our suspect buying a knife. So they're broad search. I want everybody that purchased this knife from your company during this time frame. And we can't write a search warrant for just open-ended. You have to give very specific time frames. And that's usually up to the judge. So if I say, I want every K-bar knife that was purchased from Amazon in a 10-year period, the judge say, no, that's too broad. I'm not going to sign this warrant. You have to narrow it down. So you have to give specific time frames.
Yeah. And so we were talking about the Tinder search warrant a little bit. Right. And we don't know. We're just taking a guess, but what was your guess as to what do you think the Tinder warrant was asking for?
It could be, it could be several things. So you got to remember when I said we know about 10 or 20% of what the detectives know. Now remember, they can access a lot of these phones and social media and stuff without search warrants. They can get consent if the parents or friends and stuff are on the accounts with them and stuff. They can actually give consent for us. So the detectives could have already looked at a lot of the social media or the phones and the data in the phones and what the phones were doing, and they could say, hey, I see this connection on the phone. Now I'm going to write a warrant to legally obtain that and preserve it and make sure that it's, you do a preservation letter so that you tell, Tinder or, the phone company, do not destroy this evidence because they constantly record over stuff. So you do a preservation letter and now you're going to do a search warrant. So when they're doing letters to Tinder, I'm thinking, just in my experience, there has to be something that got the killer focused on one or all of the people in the house. That would make sense. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But I think that there could be some kind of connection where the person is reaching out to them over the Tinder. But again, I don't need to look at all the Tinders if I've already looked at the Tinders and saw the specific one that I think is of evidentiary value, and now I'm getting the warrant just for that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting when we were talking about that. Okay, I was muted. Okay, awesome. Am I back? Okay, awesome. John's like, I can hear you. I'm like, hi, you're on my phone, John. I can hear you. We're good. Me and you, we're good. Okay. So let's ask these questions. So this is from a little while ago. SJSU philosopher says, if they had victim DNA in Brian Kohlberger's Elantra, would that fact leak?
I would think, well, you would hope not. I know that they took a lot of items out of the car and sent off for testing, but there's nothing that showed us the results of the testing yet. And you would hope that all the police officers and lab technicians and stuff would be professional enough to not leak that information. Strategically, you don't want your evidence out there.
Right? Like, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
You know, I keep saying it, but you know, there's no way of us to know what the detectives know, and that's by design. You know, he doesn't want to have his case compromised and that kind of stuff. He doesn't want to, you know, again, there's a lot of people insert themselves into these cases. You would be amazed how many people, especially in a place like LA and things like that, that the more you put out in the public, the more people are going to call and try and attempt to insert themselves into the case. So you want to keep it to yourself, keep it to the vest, and the only people that know specific things are the people that are closely related to the case.
People do insert themselves a lot. It's interesting too, like just doing YouTube. It happens, you know, it's just like YouTube, but people like insert themselves. It's just interesting. JB wants to know, so why didn't they arrest him sooner than the search of his apartment or even question him about the car? I think we went over the why they didn't question him about the car prior, because they needed to have evidence built so that he doesn't have an out and then be able to escape or go destroy evidence or like burn his car or whatever.
Yeah, and again, you know, obviously the investigators in this case, their top priority is to get whoever did it in custody as soon as possible. But you have so many legal requirements to make sure that you have a strong, solid case, and that you're not going to violate anybody's rights. You don't want to make a mistake on a case like this. And I can guarantee, I mean, I can write a search warrant myself and take it to a judge. But in a case like this, I write the search warrant. A district attorney is going to be reading it before I take it to the judge.
Because you're thorough, though, John. We talked about that. You're like, I'm like, why are there all these mistakes in the PCA? You're like, well, someone would have read mine and edited it, but I guess no.
I am not. I never proclaimed to be a writer, and I always have somebody checking my grammar and spelling.
No, I think that's a good point. Yeah, and you know, I love that. Like you kind of like shifted my thinking a little, because I was just like looking at it from, and people do that a lot. Like with cases, like that's what we do, is we kind of look at it from the perspective of like where we are. So it's just good to kind of broaden your horizons and hear from somebody who has worked major crimes. Oh, can you tell us about Okay, Heather, I'm gonna answer this. I need to write this down. Shoot, I'm gonna forget it again. Actually, I'm gonna keep Heather's up. I'm just gonna ask you because I'm gonna forget it, John. Why is this not a cartel hit? Can you tell? Because you've worked cartel hits, like major cartel hits.
Well, again, I can't say this is not a cartel hit.
Okay. Out of your,
to me, it would not appear to be one, and it would not really make sense. Could there be narcotics involved? But what I would call a cartel, over a large Mexican or Colombian or South American cartel, they're not going to be in Moscow, Idaho. There's no reason to be there. That is not a distribution hub. That's not a place where major narcotics is being distributed from. It's a place where cartel narcotics, after it's been transferred 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 different organizations, is going to end up in Moscow. Yeah, but it's not what I would call a true cartel place to be. There's no reason for it. How much is there narcotics being sold in that town? Absolutely. There's no town in the United States where it's not. Is there a big market for certain types of drugs on a college campus? Absolutely. Did some of that narcotics originate in Mexico with a cartel? Absolutely. But it came across the border, and it might not have even been the cartel that brought it across the border. They use organizations that the only thing that they do is go across the border. So a cartel is going to have a very large shipment, 200, 400, 500 kilos minimum, that's going to come across the border. And then it's going to be sent to another organization who's going to break it up into 10, 15 kilo increments and be shipped out again. And then, and it's going to be constantly stepped on by these different groups.
Stepped on, right? So by the time you buy it in Moscow, Idaho, it's been stepped on, but it's fine.
So, could there be criminal narcotic organizations in Moscow? Absolutely. Somebody's moving the narcotics. Somebody's from the street level dealer to the mid-level dealer to we call somebody a major violator because they're moving over 10 kilos a time, multiple times a week. So could there be a major group there? Yeah, there could be, but what I would call a true cartel, and this is not, the cartel is not going to do things to draw attention of law enforcement in the United States. It's bad for business.
Bad for business.
Yeah. Right.
Killing for...
Do they do assassinations? Do they, hunt people? Yeah. Do they do some, major... there's a lot of police officers killed in Mexico and stuff like that. There's a lot of corruption there. But, they're hesitant to do it in the U.S. The recent case with the kidnapping, the cartel was saying, hey, that was a mistake. Here are the guys that did it. Punish them. Just because they don't want heat on themselves because they want to do business. Something like this connected to what I would call a cartel doesn't make sense to me. But again, I don't know all the facts, so I can't say for sure.
Right, and when they do make a mistake, like killing doing when a cartel makes a mistake and they kill somebody and it gets really big, that case gets really big, those people are green lighted in prison. Everyone's out to get them at that point, basically, right? Because the cartel is out to get them because they did something that drew attention to the cartel, right?
Yeah, well, like street gangs who move some of the narcotics here, if they make a mistake or they can be green lighted for different reasons, but the cartels, for them to be the true cartels to be in Moscow, I don't think so.
Yeah, so it's like just a thing of like maybe a definition, because like in LA we have crazy cartels, I guess, as like And that's one of, yeah. Okay. So let's go back to
in LA. We're not, there's some organized crime, but not as much as you would think. But the majority of narcotics is being moved through the street gangs and, the hierarchy of the street gangs, not cartels.
Okay.
That one case that we talked about where we worked on where the Burbank officer was killed. That was a very unique case in the street gang that got involved in the murder of that police officer. Their street gang had direct ties to a cartel, but that was very unusual. And that we knew it as soon as we came in contact because of the purity of the narcotics that they were, and the expensive weapons that they had, and that kind of stuff. So we could immediately see, hey, there's a family connect. We later discovered, hey, there's a family connection between people in this street gang and a mid-level or mid-level to higher level cartel member in Mexico. And so that family member was cutting out a couple different and getting some of the pure narcotics more directly right to this particular street gang. But that was very, very rare.
In that case, if anyone is interested, there is a Discovery Plus, like 3-episode Discovery Plus show called American Cartel. It was a case where a Burbank officer got killed. And what I hear, you don't know this, John, but what I hear, you might know this, but you don't know I know it, is to this day, the gang members from Violent Boys, when they talk about the officer, as soon as they say his name, they say, rest his soul, because they say he wasn't supposed to get killed. They were going for his partner. Yeah, he was a rookie. That's what I told you how I know, like, somebody that was on the inside of that. Like, that's what they told me. They go, to this day, they say, God bless the soul. So I don't know what that means to them, but that gang was green lighted in prison, because they didn't pay their taxes. So
they weren't paying taxes to the Mexican mafia in prison. So that gang was green lighted.
They were green lighted. So and I was like, why didn't they just go into Gen Pop and it would be murder, right? You can't just put people who are green lighted into Gen Pop, right? Like, because they're going to get killed. Like, there's a bounty on their head. Okay.
But they've since, paid off and bought off the green lights. So they're okay now.
Are they okay? Are they not green lit anymore?
No.
So they wised up. And the interesting thing about them was they stopped those guys, that the Violent Boys were, they started looking, they dressed in a way that made them look like college students and not gang bangers. So they were like a little smarter than, yeah. Interesting. I didn't know they weren't green lit anymore. Okay. They paid their taxes. All right. That's why when you're in a gang, you pay taxes. When you go to prison, you're not killed, and you're protected. Okay. We talked about, let me ask Heather's question. So Heather says, I don't understand why law enforcement alerted the borders. And I think she was talking originally about the Canadian borders. Why would you alert the borders?
Like for us in LA, it's very, if you have specific suspect information or vehicle information, you alert the borders, because once a person flees the border and gets across the border, there's a lot of red tape to get them back, especially from Mexico. It's easier if they're a U.S. citizen, but if they're from Mexico, it's sometimes very difficult to get them back. The same thing with Canada. It's easier from Canada, but there's a lot of red tape. So sometimes when people commit heinous crimes, they flee. And so one of the routine things that we do if you're near a border, even if you're not near a border, if you have very specific information on the suspect, a vehicle, or that kind of stuff, you put out border alerts so that if they attempt to cross the border, they're detained or apprehended and are not allowed in that other country.
Okay, so if you were the one writing that for the border alerts, would you instruct the officers to put them somewhere and not ask questions? because you want to be the one to ask questions if you're the lead, right?
Yeah, if you can do that.
If you, what do you mean?
You can in the border alerts, but you have to have a very, like, usually you'll have to have a warrant or something to, if you want to detain, you're going to have a warrant or something in the system. If you can't arrest, you don't have enough to arrest, you don't get to arrest them at the border when they turn across, but now you know they're out of the country.
Okay.
You know that they fled.
So you have the intel, you just didn't have enough probable cause to get a warrant, but you at least have the intel that they have crossed the border at this point.
Right.
Okay.
And in a case where, which happened to me before, if I know somebody's crossing the border, I don't have enough arrest, I'll alert the other country and say, can you track my guy until I have enough to arrest?
And do they do it? Do they help?
Some are more cooperative than others. Canada usually, because of some training and a lot of cases that I've done a lot of cases that involve Canada, and I have a lot of contacts within the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So I've always had a lot of cooperation from Canada. Mexico is very hit and miss.
Yeah, I would think, but like you're yeah, I won't say. I have to tell you something. I told your best friend. So I know John through my really good friend, who's his best friend. They were both they both retired from LAPD on the same day I went to his retirement party. I said, are you coming? I said, John's doing a live, and he goes, I go, did he tell you? And he goes, no, he's missing guys night. And I'm like, he's missing guys night to hang out with me? He's like, I don't know why he's missing guys night, but he's missing it. So I just wanted to say thank you. Like, it just touches me so much that you decided. I know how important guys night is to you.
Well, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I had I'm doing a guy thing tomorrow, and so I was doing a thing with my wife tonight.
Okay, so it's not because, okay, well, actually that makes me feel better. So it was the wifey came first. Okay, awesome. Jennifer, I'll ask this in, okay, I'll ask it now because it's up. So Jennifer SG says, question for John. On the inventory list, number 1 says knife. If that knife were suspected to be the murder weapon, would it have stated that? Does it mean something being in the number 1 spot? You're going to love this.
Well, I don't know all the policies and procedures of Idaho. If I was doing this receipt and I suspected that was a murder weapon, I would not have put on the property receipt murder weapon or K-bar knife or whatever. I would have left it vague like they did. In LA, if we list things early, usually it's in the order they're found, or in a specific case where we have multiple people searching, it's going to be of importance or identifiable items that have serial numbers like that. So, but again, I have no idea their policies and procedures or their routine. And, offline, Bella and I talked a lot about knife. Because they did mention the Smith & Wesson pocket knife and stuff like that. So again, this could be a K-bar knife and is out for testing, or it could have been a kitchen butcher knife that they collected for some unknown reason. We don't know. We can surmise. I would think that if you're collecting that knife and you're listed number 1, there's some significance why. I know that like collecting a Smith & Wesson knife, Smith & Wesson they distribute other knives. I think they have a version of the K-bar too. So if I'm trying to connect them to like a purchase of a K-bar, maybe that's why I would take a Smith & Wesson knife. Or I don't have all the information back from the coroner as to are all the wounds from the same weapon and that kind of stuff. So I would take other knives. But I'm surmising. I'm completely guessing. I would say there's probably some significance to that knife, but we have no way of knowing.
And, you know, we had touched upon this, like, about them saying early on that this was a targeted attack, that in a press conference that Chief Fry said this was a targeted attack. And without knowing the case and being involved in the case, you came to the conclusion that, again, press conferences are there to quell public fears and for political motivations and political reasons, right? So
yeah, so again, we don't know if when he said that there was some true significance to it or not, or if that was something he was saying in community relations and politically trying to, you know, like you said, call the community and that kind of stuff. Or if they're, you know, in a case like this, that the chief and the spokesman, they're getting briefed on the case, but obviously they're not going to know nearly what the investigators knew, who are, you know, like when you first talked about this case, you knew a lot more about the case than I did. You were giving me briefings. That's what's happening with the chief and the spokesperson. You know, they're going to come to us, you know, once a day, twice a day, depending on how often they're doing it, or just before, and we're going to give them the tidbits that, you know, we're just going to give them a quick briefing. You know, again, not knowing what came back from the coroner. You know, was there one person that had, you know, significantly more injuries versus one or two killing blows? You know, that kind of thing. You know, again, we don't know, but is it possible that in the 17 minutes, or was what was the time frame?
Okay, well, they gave you. This is another thing we talked about. 4 o'clock to 4:25 is the official time frame, but the car was there at 4:04. The car took off at 4:20, and you said, "Tell us about that, because that's amazing." Okay, tell us. You said because you want, but okay, tell us, John.
Well,
shut up.
Two things. The point I want to make is, it was, you know, 17, 16 minutes or whatever. Do I think that one person can go into a house and kill 4 people and leave that house? Absolutely. Do they have evidence of a second suspect? I don't know. But in my opinion, is it possible for one person to do this in that time frame? Yes. And, you know, the second question, we were talking about giving time frames. You know, I would have personally give myself a little more time, because you don't want to. You want to be accurate within a time frame, but you don't want to be wrong. So what if, you know, somebody's camera wasn't synced and it's like 2 minutes fast on the video footage? So you give yourself a little wiggle room, because you just don't want to be wrong. Again, that's the defense is looking for anything they can point out to make it look like you made a mistake.
Yeah, that's their job. And, you know, okay. So somebody had a really good question, Erica, and she says, does John think there's more than one who committed the murders and more than one knife used? We're not going to really know about the knife, because John hasn't seen the crime scene, or obviously, like, the autopsies, we all haven't. He's in the same position we are, except he has a lot more experience than we do in writing search warrants and working with really crazy people and murderers. But yeah, so the question, I think,
a couple things, and depending on the types of injuries and stuff like that. So sometimes, based on the injuries, the coroner can, you know, say each one of these injuries, without a doubt, were use this exact same weapon, because they're using very intricate measurements and stuff like that, how far the knife went into the body and what pattern it left, and that kind of thing. And like the K-bar, the backside of the K-bar is serrated to be used as a utility knife. It's a combat utility knife. So you could use that back serrated part to scale fish or cut wood and that kind of stuff, right? So that's going to leave a very distinctive, because, several sides of the wound are going to be very clean and sliced, and the back side of it's going to be very ripped and jagged because of the, so those type of things. So the coroner can say sometimes, depending on the type of the wounds, if there's, pulling and, and if a person's fighting, sometimes they will extend the wounds and stuff like that. So sometimes they can say, without a doubt, the same knife was used on each one of these wounds, but sometimes you just can't tell because of the tearing and different stuff like that. I don't think anything's come out from the coroner to tell us exactly how many injuries were on each victim, and we know they're mostly upper torso. I think that's all they said about it.
Yeah. With you still there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. My phone's so weird right now. It's creeping me out. Yeah. So again, and this is all, just we've seen about like 10, John was saying like 10 to 20% of what they have, what law enforcement has. And honestly, we're not entitled to it, right? So like this is what we do, is we just kind of like put our brains together and like what ifs and all this stuff. But like, as it comes out, because we want whoever did this to be convicted, we don't want an arrest, we want a conviction. This is a very scary person who can do this. So yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons for not giving out, the bulkier case. And, one of the reasons is you don't want to taint the jury pool, the people who are in that area. One of the last things a detective wants to see, or a prosecutor wants to see, is what they call a change of venue, where the defendant's going to say, hey, this neighborhood's heard so much about this case, and there's so much false information out there. There's no way I could get a fair trial here, so we're going to move it to another county, or we're going to, depending how far they can convince the judge they need to go. I mean, that just makes everybody's life a lot more miserable. And I have to be honest, until this case, and you started asking me about it, especially since I retired, I almost never watch the news. I usually don't. I hear little tidbits about some of these major cases, but I don't follow them, because I know almost every major case that I worked in LA, I would be out at a crime scene, and I know what I saw, I know what I was doing, I know what was there, what wasn't there, and I'd come home, I'd turn on the news, and I'd hear something completely different. I go, no, that's not what happened at all. But there's so much inaccurate reporting. People want to know. People are curious. They want to hear. And if you have to not give them information, but if you don't, then they're going to start surmising and looking at things. And, so in this particular case, just because Bella got me interested in it and started asking about it, I've been following I listened to a couple other podcasts and stuff, and, you have 10 to 20% of knowledge, and they're just trying to fill things in. And people listening to those broadcasts or other podcasts, they don't realize that the person making the statements doesn't have any inside information. They're surmising, and like the rest of us have to do.
Right. We're all doing the same thing. And yeah. So, and that's the other thing, is there was a few things that we caught that mainstream media had said that was just like, what? Wait a minute, especially after the gag order, like the stuff that was coming out was like, how is this, like, wait, how do you guys even have this? Like, do you have Brian Koberger's phone? We're just so confused. But it is, and John was saying this before, is he, like he just said right now, he would be working a scene. He knows this, crime that happened intimately, and he would go on and turn on the news, and it's just all BS that he hears. So it's just like,
do leaks happen? Absolutely. Do law enforcement leak information? Most of the time, I believe it's not intentional.
Okay.
You know, I come home from a crime scene, I talk to my wife, and I give her a little bit of too much information, and then tomorrow she's getting her hair cut. She mentioned it to one of her friends, cut her hair, and and it gets passed on. And by the time the fourth or fifth person hears it, it's slightly correct, or it's been embellished 2 or 3 times. The hearing of that one of the victim's photos was in Brian's phone.
Right, that.
But nobody can tell you where that came from.
Where did it come from? Where did it come from?
There might be some connection between Brian's phone and one of the victims, or multiple victims, but we don't know.
Okay. What about this? Did you hear about the WSU letter that he got fired? I'm sorry, you guys. I can't with that. He got fired. News Nation ran with this. And when we were on Twitter, we're on Twitter looking at asking for this evidence, first of all, it's a federal act that you're not allowed to talk about somebody's, as a student, what they do, what they don't do. So how does anyone besides WSU and Brian have this letter that says he got fired as a TA, the days he got fired, that he got into an altercation with a professor? Did you know about this, John? I didn't even talk to you about this.
No, I think I briefly heard something about it, but nothing I know anything a lot about.
And it's it's just, we'll talk about it and then I'll fill you in and then we can maybe have a laugh about it a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna go back to some of these questions. They're good questions. And everyone's loving you, by the way. BB Mommy. BB Mommy doesn't have a question. She just said, John, you're wonderful. Thank you for spending Saturday with us. And a lot of people have said that.
Well, Bella rekindled the detective in me. I'm really curious about this case. And again, I haven't followed very many cases that much, just because it's frustrating to me. But it, that's one of the things from being retired. I don't miss most of the job, but I do miss the hunt. A good case like this and tracking a guy down.
I love that. Okay. So Rachel Jacobs says, could you please ask him what he thinks about many people being at the crime scene before 911 responders arrived? Because I don't know if you know this, John, they didn't call 911 allegedly. They called their friends before. Yeah. And it says, and the long period of time taken to call 911. What do you think about it?
So again, I don't know how much of that we know, how accurate it is. Was there probably a long time from the actual murder time to where 911 was called? Yeah, absolutely. How many people were in the scene and stuff, we have no idea. But one of the things is the surviving victim that made the observations.
Okay.
Heard some things, and then peeked out her door and saw the guy wearing all black and a mask going out towards the rear door. We don't know what state of mind she was in. We don't know, if she was out till 1 or 1:30 in the morning. We don't know if she still had some alcohol in her. We don't know, and I don't want to say that she does have maybe used some narcotics, because we don't know. We don't know what her frame of mind is. But I do know that people being frozen by fear is a very real thing. Everybody deals with stress and fearful situations in different ways. Okay. And so until I talk to her, I know what happened. I know what she said. I'm not going to criticize her because I don't know, and I don't have enough information to know. I mean, I physically have seen people curl up in a little ball because they were so scared and could not react or handle situations because they're so fearful. And we don't know when she looks out her door, because I heard some comments about this, we don't know when she looked out her door, did she open the door and is standing right there?
Yeah.
Or did she crack the door and the person walking by didn't even notice her?
Right.
Didn't hear her, didn't notice her. So is it strange that there was such a length of time? Yeah. I've come across a lot of victims whose first reaction is not to call 911. You'd be surprised how many victims of crimes call their mom or their dad first, because that's a comfort, that's safety. If you don't know, if you're not truly comprehending what's wrong with your friend, is your first reaction, again, not understanding what her state of mind is. Are you so afraid for her that she might have fallen and drunk or whatever? You don't want to get her in trouble, or sometimes we just don't think clearly, and under stressful situations. So we have no idea. But again, every one of those people we're talked to, where they touch, what they touch, who they call, what they called, that they have a statement from that witness as to why she did this, why she didn't do that. But we just don't have those answers. Is it strange? Yeah. Does it happen? Yeah. I can tell you I've seen some very strange things that people do out of extreme fear. They think they're going to die. They do some very strange things.
Without judging her, I don't know what I can say without judging her, but it is 8 hours. It's okay. So what kind of defense witness is she going to make if she was in a frozen shock phase and then basically goes to sleep or whatever for 8 hours? Is this going to be a hindrance to the defense, to the prosecution, as having her as an eyewitness? Because we already know that eyewitness testimony is one of the weakest things we could have as evidence, right? So
yeah, that's true. Again, I've never been to a crime scene where all the victims gave the exact same description. It just doesn't happen. And that's why, in these, mass attacks, it usually comes out that there's 3 or 4 suspects when in reality it ends up being one, because there's so many different people calling in, reporting different things. Wow. I'm on the top floor, this guy's shooting, and he runs down the stairs, so I call and say, hey, there's a guy shooting up here, and then now there's somebody calling me out, there's a guy downstairs shooting, because now the one person is downstairs, so there's always confusion in the statements and stuff. So yeah, eyewitness testimony is good, but sometimes it can be confusing. Is the defense going to make a big deal about this? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Can it be truly explained away? There's going to be some kind of explanation. The fact that for whatever reason she didn't call, does that change the fact that led to identifying who the suspect was? What relevance does it have to this evidence that points to this person as doing these murders in this fashion at this time? What relevance truly does it have, the fact that she reported it 8 hours later? Unless there was something that interfered with their investigation in between. These guys tampered with evidence, they moved bodies, they put a sheath on the bed, or, whatever.
It was their van print.
Yeah, which it very well could be. You never know.
See, there's so many.
What state the blood was in at the time that they went there, or how much blood was there.
So the defense is going to make a big deal about her taking 8 hours. Yeah, it's just.
Well, the defense is going to do what a lot of listeners and a lot of other people following this case are going to do. They're going to take small things that may or may not have any relevance to the case, and they're going to try and make it a thing. Because that's the defense's job, is
right.
to don't look at this, look at this.
Right.
That's their job. Their job is to deflect from the evidence that shows that their client did the murder. So are they going to bring it up? Yeah. But when you're thinking about other ways, does her not calling 911 for that length of time, does that impact any of this other evidence that shows that this guy did it? Or is thinking about that a waste of my time? Because I'm probably not going to get a true answer to what really happened or why it was. Was it fear? Was it not fear? Was it, drug or alcohol induced? Was it, whatever. Hey, but again, it's a very common thing to, the fear is exhausting. And could I see somebody being so frightened and then go and fall asleep? Yeah. I mean, that happens all the time. But
it does happen a lot.
Yeah, when people are feared to drastic. Well, some people, when they're so afraid and they have this adrenaline rush, even like police officers who get into life-threatening shooting and stuff, one of the first reactions after is the adrenaline dump is to be very fatigued.
So it's the adrenaline dump fatigue. Okay, I get that. Yeah. I can get that.
We have no idea what the explanation truly is. But does it matter? Does the fact that she called does it interfere with any of the other evidence that proves or doesn't prove who did this?
Yeah. I mean, I think that they're going to have, the defense is going to have a field day with her. And if the prosecution doesn't call her, the defense is going to end up calling her anyways because she's in the PCA. They did the search warrant. Well, okay. What we know for the search warrant from his residence, his parents' residence, was all looking for black clothing. That's based on her testimony in the PCA. And it's like, always bothered me that it's this eyewitness testimony that they're basing all these things on, but could it be we don't know? There's things we don't know that they're searching for, I guess. John.
What's that?
Could there be stuff that we don't know that they're searching for in the search warrant? Maybe because I just found it so bizarre that they're putting so much stock in her eyewitness testimony.
Are they putting so much stock in it, or that's the only thing that they have to go on what the suspect was wearing at the time of the murder? Wow. That's all they have to go on.
Okay.
Is one, so of course when you're asking to seize things, you're gonna, because now I want to look at all his dark clothing and see any of it has any traces of blood or any other evidential value, dog hairs or victim's hairs or that kind of thing. So I want to search that clothing, and if my my witness tells me, hey, the suspect was wearing all dark clothing, right? I'm not going to go in his closet and start pulling out white shirts and stuff like that.
Okay.
And test that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. There could be reasons we just don't know. MK says she wasn't too afraid to call her friends, but she was too afraid to call law enforcement to get help, or her roommates, probably for her roommates. If that was me, I'd be in jail. No way would the 8-hour BS work for me.
Yeah, again, we have no idea what her reasoning was behind it. And there's no way we could know, and we're not going to know until she testifies. Is the defense going to make a big deal about it? Absolutely. Does she have, whatever her explanation is, there's going to be a portion of the people hearing it going to go, that's reasonable to me. And there's going to be a portion of the people, they're going to go, nope, that's not reasonable.
Right.
That's not. But you can't put yourself in another person's mind state and predict what they're going to do under certain conditions. You know, is it strange? Yeah.
Yeah.
But why it happened? You have no way of knowing.
Yeah. And she won't be they will poke holes, because MK said, how is she credible if she's under the influence? That's going to be one of the things the defense goes after. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But that's going to be, so anybody who's been under the influence, does that mean that everything you see or hear cannot be believed because you were under the influence? It doesn't, right?
True.
And what else do you have to go on? Could her judgment be impaired? Could her reflexes be impaired? But does that mean when you're impaired, because again, we do not know if she was impaired or to what extent she was impaired, if she was at all. Does that mean that you no longer can hear or see or make observations or think? Again, it's the same thing when I talked about how some people react to fear. Some people shut down. Some people continue functioning and function at a better. That's what your body's trying to do with an adrenaline dump.
Right.
That's why getting the tunnel visions, because it's trying to help you handle a situation more effectively, and it's shutting down parts of your body that you don't need in this situation. So everybody's going to react differently. What I'm saying is, I've seen victims of violent crimes. I've seen witnesses to very violent things in fear, physically shut down and not be able to react.
It's interesting because, like, for me, one of the first things.
But I've never seen that for 8 hours.
I've never seen that. Okay, thank you. Yes. Bizarre, but yeah, I mean, we don't know what happened. I just think that they're gonna have a field day with her, and yeah, it's just bizarre.
But on your cases, you don't get to pick your witnesses in cases.
That's true. That's true.
Again, I don't know anything about this girl. I don't know anything about her, so I can't say. But sometimes bad people witness things, and then now you got to try and put them on the stand or try. But the defense is going to eat it up because there's some vulnerabilities there.
Yeah. Sheeby wants to know, if not like a mini trial, why do defense need so much time?
What, for the preliminary hearing?
I think that's the question, Sheeby. I'm sorry, like, this was asked a while ago. I just started for but I think it's about the prelim.
Yeah. So again, the prelim is just to show whether there's enough evidence to actually have a trial. They don't want to spend the same length of time. They don't want to bring all the witnesses in. This is a lot shorter, a lot quicker. And in discovery, again, what their policy is in Idaho or how they're doing it, I don't know. In some cases, you do all of your discovery in one dump. I take everything I have, I copy it, I deliver it to the defense. Here's everything I have. Sometimes on a case like this, it's continuing, ongoing, and building. They'll start giving them these parts and stuff like that. But I'm assuming with these warrants and stuff, there's volumes of information. And the reason for the defense is saying, hey, I don't want to go to the prelim, or I don't want to go to trial until I had a sufficient amount of time to go through all these phone records and consult my own experts about this phone data. I don't want to, I want to have my own social media person look at all these volumes of megabytes of material that you just hand over to me. I need somebody that's going to take the time to read all of these things and look for the holes and that kind of stuff. It's just personnel, resources, time management. And again, if I'm going to defend somebody, I don't want to go in it half blind. I want to know everything I could possibly know to put on a good defense.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to star your comment and we'll get right to it. Let me just get to these that were a little bit. Rachel Jacobs says, do you think that the crime is drug related? In your opinion? It would be your opinion only because we don't know for certain.
Based on what I'm seeing, to me, there's no indication that something like this will be drug related. You know, it's just, it doesn't ring that to me. To me, this rings of a person who's mentally disturbed and has a perceived wrong by somebody in the house or over a perceived relationship, probably. But again, I'm guessing, I'm just going based on my experience with dealing with these types of cases. I think, in my opinion, there is going to be some connection between Brian and at least one of the people in the house. Now, whether that's a perceived connection or not, you don't know. I don't know anything about Brian. Are we dealing with a sociopath? I don't know. Or, a psychopath? We don't know. But I've seen cases where it could be that the suspect sees one or multiple of the victims. He views their TikTok multiple times. In his mind, he's forming a relationship with that person. And now that person posts something in their TikTok with a male who's hugging them. So the victim has no idea that the suspect is even thinking about him. But now he feels betrayed and wronged by her, and now he's got a grudge towards her. He's angry at her. Those are the type of things that can happen. Is there a possibility that the suspect in this case reached out to one of the victims, or at least was in the same place that one of the victims were at one time? Yeah, I think that's going to come out. I think that there's going to be some connection, whether it's in the suspect's mind or it truly was an actual connection with one or more of the victims.
And you even said, hey, it could even be Ethan. We don't know. We don't know if it's female or male in this. Right. It could be any one of them. But
I'm assuming it's one of the girls because they were real active on TikTok and because that wasn't Ethan's normal residence. So if I was hunting Ethan or stalking Ethan, I might have come across his house, but that probably wouldn't have where I went to try and find him.
John, you being in law enforcement for 33 years, I mean, it's just so quick with these things. It's just normal in your head to just, I love it. It's like the best, when we talk, it's like the best conversations. And I love sharing this with people on YouTube that are really into this case because I really wanted them to hear what I hear when I'm on the phone with you and we're just like going through it. And I'm like taking massive notes, like, oh my gosh, tell me more. And then interspersed with, can I come to your interrogation? Can I come to your interrogation conferences? I really love body language, but it's amazing. You're amazing. I've kept you for a long time. It's almost been 2 hours. I want to just ask you these. There's like 3 questions. Megan R., Lex Luthor, and Patty and Pink. We're going to ask these 3 questions. Then we're going to let poor John go be with his wife that he gave up guys' night for. She's such a good sport. I love her. She's a dear friend to one of my dear friends. You guys are dear friends to my dear friends. You guys are amazing. If you even knew.
That's how I stayed married for 35 years. Happy wife, happy life.
That I know there's a reason I love you, John. Happy wife, happy life. That's all that's all anyone needs to know. Megan R. wants to know, do you know how much info could potentially be gained from Brian Kohberger's phone if he had it off the night of the crime? John, are you familiar with cell phone data, etc.?
Yeah, I hate to say it because you don't want to give up secrets, but almost every major case I've been involved in were at least partially solved by phones because there's so much information and data that can be gained from your your cell phone. And as we go, that information becomes more and more. Yeah, there's different apps on your phone that can tell, if you're using health apps and stuff, we can look in your phone and see, were you still or were you walking? So you might have turned off your cell signal, but you might have apps on your phone that are still recording your personal health data. Is your heart accelerated, that kind of stuff? Are you putting in steps, or are you stationary?
Wow.
Even if you have the phone, if it's depending on whether it's powered off or versus airplane mode. See, powered off, you're shutting the whole device off, right? Putting airplane mode, you're just telling, hey, don't connect to a tower, don't look out for a provider or service, right? But your phone's still on, and certain apps might be still running. I hate to put out too much of the.
You don't have to. Don't put out too many secrets. It's okay.
Most of the cars now have a lot of technology in the car. So the car tells me when you plugged in your phone to the car charger. That kind of stuff. So the things that mostly you're getting on these is, the location of the phone. But there are so many, depending on what kind of apps a person has on their phone and things like that, and what kind of your technical person, how good they are, you would be amazed how much information you can gain from a cell phone.
So unethical advice would be, if I should just shut my phone off if I was being naughty, like completely shut it off.
I don't want to give you.
Okay, no, we're not doing that. It's unethical.
No, if you're going to go commit a murder, you should have your phone on, pinging to the cell towers and in your pocket.
Well, yeah, actually, yes. Okay, thank you, John. Yes. Okay. I've never thought about it, though. Never have I ever thought about it.
Again, when I started LAPD in 1986, and when I first was a young detective, the older detectives or my boss would walk into the squad room and go, "What are you doing at your desk? You can't catch bad guys for your desk. Get out there." Right? And so the big thing was to be out in the field. Nowadays, detectives, I literally have in my squad detectives that were not very good in the field and very rare, but some of the best detectives that work for me, because there's so much available to us on computers and databases. I can sit from my computer, I can access traffic cams and license plate readers. Like in major urban places like Los Angeles, there are license plate readers everywhere. There's license plate readers in fixed locations. There's license plate readers on police cars. There's license plate readers in traffic cams. So I can sit here and I can track your license plate, where you've been for the last couple of months. I can access all kinds of database and find all kinds of, information. And most of today's society, the bad guys, they make it easy for us because they post everything on social media.
So true.
Our bad guys, they'll post on social media, and we'll quite often find incriminating information on their social media because they're posting places where they've been. They're taking a picture of what they had for dinner that night, and all that kind of stuff. They're putting more and more information out there for us to find.
Yeah. And I'll tell you off, like someone stole my checks, and I, went to robbery division. They went and then they cashed them, and they told me, LAPD told me that they couldn't, and I guess this is a few years ago, they couldn't access social media. And so I went into social media and all of his posts with every hat and the jewelry he wore, and I gave it to them. I'm this guy's wearing this hat all the time, and he always wears this jewelry. Go look on these cams, find this guy. But yeah, he just posted all the time.
And that's, again, as technology changes and as the social media usage and the different type, the laws regulating them are always changing. So, when I first started doing phone tap search warrants, the technology that we were asking for changes and the laws change. So we had to start rewriting some of that canned language in the warrants to ask for different stuff, or because we weren't getting back everything we could, but again, I don't want to give out too much information, but the more technology you have, the more technology your car has, the more
scary.
Yeah.
I mean, scary, John. Like 1984 Orwell is here. Like proud, good and proud. Okay, so let's go back. Lex Luthor had a great question and wanted to know your opinion about this. Do you believe that the 2 quote traffic stops in Indiana were planned?
It just on face value, it does not appear, because based on the warrants and stuff, I don't know that they had put him in that car. I have no way of knowing, but it appears that he just likes to tailgate and drive too close to the vehicles in front of him, but it's very common for agencies to stop people in the same place, because they get reports on, police departments are trying to be more efficient too. So they'll say, in this specific area, we've had, increase of traffic accidents by 10%, and the major cause of traffic accidents was following too close, or, illegal left turn on a red light, or something like, and so then they'll send their guys out there, hey, go enforce this violation in this area because our traffic crimes it. So the fact that they stopped him so close proximity, it could have been one of these, traffic things, but we just don't have enough information. Could they have had a bolo out before that? Or a lot of times, if I'm I'm undercover doing a surveillance on somebody, I will once we get out of a specific area, I will contact a uniform and have them do a traffic stop on the person to try who's in the car, what phones do they have. I'm trying to tie somebody to a phone or a car. We'll sometimes use uniform in the area to do a roost stop. Again, they saw a violation of the vehicle code, and they used that to stop him. But that's a ruse for us to obtain additional information, and that is legal as long as he is doing a true violation.
As long as he really did violate. And you know what I love about following too closely? It's so subjective. Do you know how many I've got? That's when I used to get tickets, was always for following too closely.
I never got a ticket for following too close.
Because you're a rule follower, John. Because why? Because you just I'm a rule breaker. We know this about me. Okay. So one more promise, and this is Patty and Pink with this great. Please ask him how Brian got outside without getting blood everywhere. Did he take a bath first? And me and John actually discussed this. And then I tripped out. I'll tell you, what John told me, somebody else who shouldn't know as much as John told me the exact same thing, and I tripped out. But okay, yes, let's have John explain this.
Okay. What were these violent attacks? Yes. But again, without seeing the crime scene photos and stuff like that, especially with puncture wounds, or you're not having an arterial spray and stuff like that, a lot of the bleeding is done after the injuries, not immediate. So when it immediately happens, it's going to take a while for some of the blood to accumulate. As a knife's going in and out and plunging in and out of a victim, there's going to be some splatter and stuff like that.
Cast off.
We have no idea how much of that's going to get on the suspect. Do I think there was blood transferred on the suspect? Absolutely. Do I think that before he left, there was a massive pool of blood? You can only bleed so fast. So how much of the blood was actually there when the suspect was there you can't tell these things. Blood does very strange things. And clothing and material absorbs blood. And blood, by sheer nature of blood, is designed to dry and coagulate quickly. So is it possible? I guarantee you who did these murders has blood on him. Is he dripping blood and going to continue to drip blood as he's leaving the house and walk down the street? Almost never. So usually the only time we find actually blood trails is if the suspect is injured in a knife attack. So we're following their continuing bleeding.
Wow.
So, you know, blood is a very strange thing, and you can't really predict what it does. I mean, splatter patterns and stuff, you can read them and tell, you know,
Direction. Yeah.
Like that. But do I think the suspect that did these 4 murders had blood transferred onto him? Absolutely. Do I think that blood could have been transferred into his car? Absolutely. Do I think he's going to leave a river of blood dripping blood as he's walking on the street? I don't. It's very, very unlikely. But another thing is, if you did see something in, I forget what document it was, but I think surveillance actually saw him cleaning his car before the arrests.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why they took the vacuum and stuff like that, because they saw him cleaning the car. And again, you know, his phone was off, but somehow they figured he was doing some a surreptitious route after the time of the murders. We don't know. Did he have overalls or something covering him, which he discarded during that drive away from the crime scene or somewhere along that path? Would I be trying to go search that path? Absolutely. If as much of that path as I could determine. You know, again, we don't know what, you know, if he's wearing gloves and he's discarding them. We don't know if he's wearing, you know, coveralls or had additional clothing with him. You know, he's supposedly a smart guy. If he's planned this, you know, you would think that he would, you know, plan for the fact that he's going to have blood transfer on.
And you said something that it's you, and the K-bar, as we know, has a guard, like, because it's a killing machine. It's, you know, and it's made for combat. It was made for Marines in combat, and it's mass produced, right, John? It's a mass produced knife.
Yes.
And
oh, go ahead. So that knife has a hilt on it, so it's designed to protect the person who's doing the stab. That knife is made to be a combat knife and for fighting. Now, a lot of times you'll see it when they're stabbing with a pocket knife or stabbing with a kitchen knife or a slimmer knife that's not designed truly for stabbing or combat. You'll see that they stab with such force and they hit a bone or something like that, their hand's going to slide along the knife. So it's very common in a place where there's a knife attacks that the suspect received cuts on their hand. But something when we have a K-bar or a knife designed for fighting, you wouldn't expect to see those as much.
Because of that guard that holds.
That's going to stop your hand from sliding down the blade.
Yeah. And so you said, so answering Patty's question even more, what John had told me was there could also be blood from, if he's holding the knife, like let's say the side, he hasn't put it in a bag or whatever, and he's holding the knife, or he hasn't left it at the scene. We don't know. There could be blood dripping off the tip of the knife. Potentially. Could be. We don't know.
But again, you know, blood by design is going to coagulate and thicken quickly and not be as conducive to dripping or running and stuff as would like a fresh cut.
Yeah. And that just blew my mind, because I'm like, it was one of the things that I'm just like, well, there's no blood and it just makes no sense. And the time is just, there's not enough time to like clean up, and there's all. And then when you explain that to me, and then when somebody explained that to me, after you explained it to me, who shouldn't know as much as you do, was really trippy. Really, really trippy. Yes. So, You guys, I'm going to thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you to the mods. Thank you to the subscribers and the members. You guys are freaking awesome. John, I know that you didn't miss guys' night for me. I know you did it for your wife. I'm going to let you hang out with her because I feel bad. I love you guys so much. Thank you so much, John, for taking the time to come in and talk to us about this. And maybe we can do it again as things progress and as we get closer to the prelim that I'm going to be going to. Maybe we could kind of do this again, and I'll be sharing everything with you as we just like talk about this case. It's so much fun to do. Thank you.
Sure, they're going to be limited in the seating and stuff. Do you know how difficult it's going to be to get inside?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty difficult. Yeah, I called the courthouse and talked to them already. I'm like, is it going to be like concert tickets in the 90s where you have to like sleep outside and like camp out? And she's like, basically like, yes, first come, first serve. Yeah, so true, so true. So I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, it's probably a really small courtroom on top of that.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a big one like we have here.
Yeah. Yeah, not like LA.
I hope I can help make sense out of some of the things that, because I know some of these things look very strange or peculiar, but if you have a true understanding of why they're the way they are, then it makes more sense.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about it tonight, but we talked about before. There was one of the search warrants that there was a delay in when the warrant was served, and to me, to people outside, that it was a big deal. But to me, there's so many logistical and technical reasons to not be able to serve the warrant, or for it to not be a priority at that particular time, depending on manpower resources like that. To me, that did make a lot of sense, or it did make sense, and it was not that big of a deal because there's no benefit to not serving it. Why would you get a warrant and then intentionally not serve it? It's just, to me, it was administrative or logistical reasons, and there's a lot of them. People do take days off, and each of these companies has a specific person or people that are law enforcement liaisons that can handle all the warrants. Those people sometimes take days off, or we have technical glitches getting the warrant to them and that kind of stuff. So to me, that wasn't a big deal. That's not one of the things I would be focusing on. But if you don't, realize that looks very strange. But
absolutely,
thinking logically, what would the nefarious reason for? What would be the purpose of it? What would it accomplish?
Yeah. So true. Well, I love this conversation. Chat's been amazing. Everyone's just loving you and your reason. And I just wanted to share some of this with everybody. Like, gosh, they're just everything you share is like gold to me. So great conversation. John, thank you. Thank your wife, please, because she like literally had to give you up on a Saturday night for us. Thank you. I'll talk to you. I'll text you like tomorrow or something.
Okay. All right.
Bye, John. Thank you so much. Good night. I'm going to let him go here too, because his microphone wasn't working. So I had to call him if you guys weren't here in the beginning. Yes. Thank you, John's wife. Thank you, John's wife. Thank you guys so much for being here with us. And, it's just, it's an interesting take from somebody who has done search work. He's not working Moscow, obviously. Like, that's the disclaimer. He knows as much as we do. And if he knows more, because he has some ins with the FBI, if he knows more, he's certainly not telling us, because that would be very unethical. So thank you guys all for being here. Thank you guys for being so kind in chat and being so sweet and everything. It was just great to spend Saturday night with you guys. And I wanted to share them with you because he's so knowledgeable, you guys. Like, literally, he's so knowledgeable. I get so much information. Thank you, mods. Thank you, mods, so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Have a really good night. Enjoy your night. Tomorrow's Lana's birthday. Wherever you guys are, it might be her birthday right now. She's out celebrating, and we wish her a very happy birthday. She's very sweet in chat. Thank you guys all for being here, asking amazing questions. You guys are like superstars. What are these questions? Friggin' amazing questions, guys. Thank you guys so much. Love seeing you all. Have a really good night. Talk to you soon.